Hello and welcome to the Experience Podcast. My name is Neil. I am a multi-dimensional being having a spiritual being having a human experience. Today with me is...
My name is Dennis, and I'm very, very excited to be here. We're going to be talking about some experiences that Neil has had, and I'll just let you start it off.
To begin, we're gonna be talking about a chemical compound by the name of LSD. And LSD stands for lysergic acid dimethylhide, and it's a extract that comes from ergot, which is a fungus that grows on wheat. And the ergot fungus has the potential to cause sensory and perceptual hallucinations with the fungus itself without the extract. So that's a pretty important point, because there's a lot of research showing currently that the ergot fungus was and has been consumed by wheat farmers.
Just by accident.
Many times by accident, but then as they begin to learn about this and how it affects the brain and the body, people also used it intentionally. But this ergot fungus, they would bake bread, and the bread would become moldy. And when you eat this moldy bread, and the ergot is the mold, it has the potential to cause these hallucinations.
You know what? That is very interesting, because when I was growing up, my mom always told me that the mold on bread can also be used as an antibiotic. So I don't know enough to elaborate, but I'm very curious. After I get done with this podcast, I'm going to do some research about the difference between that and the ergot fungus, or if it's the same thing.
It's a different thing, and the reason is because the ergot is specifically a wheat rye bread, and this was bread made from wheat that was taken from the field. It was processed, and then you make bread with it. The mold that grows on bread today, that bread has gone through such an extensive process with the flour going from the field to the bread, that the fungus that grows, a lot of the bread has very little to no wheat in it. Or if it does have wheat, it's gone through such an extensive process that the fungus that grows on it is most likely not the ergot fungus. So that's kind of the differences with that. But with as a plural, LSDs, with that, those are crystalline compounds that are prepared from natural ergot alkaloids or synthetically, and then from those LSD crystalline compounds, that's where the actual drug LSD can be made from, is from these crystalline LSDs in the ergot. And those would be called lysergic acids in the ergot. So before we continue more into this video, I just want to present to the viewer that this video is for harm reduction, education, and entertainment purposes. So, and continuing with the LSD, so it affects the default mode network, and also the reticular activating system, which is in part directly related to the default mode network. And this default mode network, as explained on Wikipedia, talking about neuroscience, the default mode network, also known as the default network or the default state network, is a large-scale brain network primarily composed of the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and the angular gyrus. It is best known for being active when a person is not focused on the outside world and the brain is at a wakeful rest, such as during daydreaming and mind wandering. It can also be active during detailed thoughts related to external task performance. Other times that the default mode network is active include when the individual is thinking about others, thinking about themselves, remembering the past, and planning for the future. So that's kind of the default mode network that can be affected when you take this LSD, and it is affected. So the changes that people experience with LSD, they did a study with 20 volunteers, and so I want to get the exact name of this study. And so in this study, they presented the 20 volunteers. So it was conducted by a Dr. Robin Carhart Harris of the Beckley Imperial Research Program. And they gave these 20 volunteers 75 micrograms of LSD, which is a very low dose amount.
Okay.
A typical paper tab of LSD consists normally of about 200 micrograms of LSD. So this was like a microdose amount for these people.
So about half a tab, a little bit under half.
It was
a tab.
under, so it was a very microdose amount.
Okay.
And
or half a dose.
What their research is showing is that the LSD is showing implications for LSD-assisted psychotherapy, as it indicates how the drug allows patients to break free from rigid modes of cognition and thought that underlie hard-to-treat conditions such as depression and addiction. And Dr. Robin continues explaining how this effect underlies the profound altered state of consciousness that people often describe during an LSD experience. It is also related to what people sometimes call egodisilussion, which means that the normal sense of self is broken down and replaced by a sense of reconnection with themselves, others, and the natural world. This experience is sometimes framed in a religious or spiritual way and seems to be associated with improvements in well-being after the drug's effects have subsided. So, in current day, we now have technology that allows us to actually see how the brain is affected on LSD. And so I want to present this to the camera, and it's showing how the brain looks underneath a brain scanner with a placebo brain on the top and the brain actively on LSD with the 4 on the bottom. And you can see the amount of connectivity that's going on in the brain. And LSD also has this effect where it affects the emotions, and it affects the way that you're looking at things, and it also affects the way that you hear things. And what Dr. Robin observed is that the changes that they observed with the brain with the patients that had these 75 micrograms of LSD was that it suggested that our volunteers were seeing with their eyes shut. Albeit they were seeing things from their imagination rather than from the outside world. We saw that many more areas of the brain than normal were contributing to the visual processing under LSD, even though the volunteers' eyes were closed. Furthermore, the size of this effect correlated with the volunteers' ratings of complex dreamlike visions. So now lysergic dimethyhide, the actual name, the scientific name for LSD, I want to present the actual definition for that, and then we're going to get right into my personal first experience with LSD. And lysergic acid dimethyhide, also known as LSD or acid, is a psychedelic drug. Effects typically include intensified thoughts, emotions, and sensory perception. At sufficiently high doses, LSD manifests primarily visual as well as auditory hallucinations. So that's some background for you as a viewer, and these websites where this come from is going to be in the description box below this video, but I highly suggest and invite you to do your own research, and the only research that is valuable to you is the research that you yourself do. So it's very important. And so, like with my first experience with LSD, it was in an outside environment, which I'm extremely thankful for, because the environment and the setting that you're in has a direct effect on the mental of the person and of the mind. And like, being in a negative environment is going to affect how you feel when you take this drug, and being in a positive environment when you take it is going to affect how you feel when you take this, because in my experience, I experienced intensified whatever I was already feeling. So it was this thing where I didn't necessarily have new feelings, but the feelings that I had were intensified.
Sure. So you mentioned environment. What environment was this that you were talking about?
So it was at a music festival.
Okay.
And it was the first music festival that I've ever been to. And It was called Electric Forest, and they still have this music festival yearly in Michigan. And it was, I believe, a 2-week long event. And for the time I was there was for like 1 week. I didn't stay 2 weeks. I was there for a week. So during that time, so prior to that time, I had already knew about LSD. I'd already researched it. I knew that it originated from ergot. And I'd done a lot of research prior to me deciding and making the decision to ingest it.
So, what do you feel was the leading indicator as far as what made you want to experience? What did you think you would gain from it by taking LSD?
Sure. So, I was 18 years of age at the time, and at that time, it was like how I saw it was there was this perception that the potential for harm and the potential for good, or like the potential for benefit of connectivity, of love, of feelings of unity, it outweighed the potential for harm. So, and then there was this aspect too, was the curiosity aspect of like, what is this thing that people are talking about? And they have these profound experiences. And like LSD was first synthesized in like the 1960s by a chemist. And he ingested it unintentionally, which is how he found out the effects. He went on a bike ride, and he had a mind-blowing bike ride. and that's where we now know about LSD today is from that first experience.
So did you know anybody personally that had done LSD at this time before you did it?
Personally, in my life, no. But
so you were going strictly off of things that you learn online on the internet and from other people's stories.
Correct. It was strictly pure information that I'd read and learned about, and from the bike ride experience, but also from YouTubers that documented their experience. That all contributed to give me some insight into how I could potentially have the best possible experience when ingesting this.
So you ingested it. You went to Electric Forest. You said this was close to a week long.
Yes.
Was this at the beginning of the festival that you took this acid?
So this is fascinating too, because, and it was the
first day?
The year, it might have been the second. I'm pretty confident it was the second. The year was 2017, which was approximately 5 years ago. And so I believe I got the thing with LSD is that you can build up a tolerance, and a tolerance in the aspect of when you take it day after day, you end up having to take more to feel an effect. And there is an aspect of basically not a beneficial aspect in that aspect.
So you can't abuse it.
So
that's what you're saying.
The non-beneficial aspect to it is that there's this disorder that when you ingest a lot of LSD, you can have persisting hallucinations. And what those are is the hallucinations do not turn off. And for people like that, they now exist in a hallucinatory experience basically throughout their lives, because their brain, basically the reticular activating system is now just off all the time, and all information is being picked up, and they have this sensory and this auditory and this emotional, they feel everything because they don't come out of the trip essentially, and now they can have this experience every day without having the drug. So that is one of the non-beneficial aspects to it. And another non-beneficial aspect, depending on how you look at it, is the aspect that you can have flashbacks from ingesting it. And these flashbacks are different than the persisting trip, because what these flashbacks normally consist of is like a purple streak of light in the corner of your vision.
So have you ever experienced those?
I have definitely experienced those. Yeah, my experience has been mostly light streaks, without having ingested the drugs. And this usually occurred for me like 3 to 4 days, and usually after a week, I no longer experienced any effects, like a flashback. But that is another, you could say, a non-beneficial aspect to LSD, and I want to bring that up to make the viewer aware, and also to increase my own awareness of LSD in itself. But going back to where you were talking about, did I take it the first day? I believe it was the second day. But I wanted to bring up how it can, when you take it, you have to take more to have the same effect.
No, when you say take it, how did you consume this? How was this consumed?
So, I purchased it on paper, and the way it's consumed is there's droppers of LSD that are dropped onto the paper, and then the paper soaks it up. So then you swallow this paper tab that contains the LSD, and that's how I ingested it orally through the mouth. And so I did that on the second day I was there, and I remember we'd already been inside the event, and it was a huge, massive event with all sorts of lights, people, thousands of people, music, and like walking inside of it on this LSD. I remember going into like the forest area where there was lots of trees and lights and people, and we were walking, and it had already started to slowly build to that point. And as we were walking in, which was probably a 15 to a 25-minute walk from where a campsite was to where we actually got into where the event was going on and all of that. And as we got there, it really was building. And I remember the noises, and the auditory perception was, I could hear things real loud, like next to me, but then I'd hear these things in the distance, these dings and this other things that I would have never been able to pick up on. these underlying tones to things that I was hearing, and there was a lot of blue and purple light, and walking into it, I felt this like joyful, energetic. I felt very energetic on it. Like,
did you feel empowered?
Not necessarily. I was just more wowed. I did not necessarily feel empowered.
Very curious.
Super curious, energetic, and like awestruck, and like I was feeling emotions of joy and of inspiration, and the whole thing had like a magical quality to it.
And what were you seeing at this point? You said you were hearing things. What were you seeing?
What I was seeing was, so there was these blue and all like different lights, but I really remember the blues and like the greens, and like they became super intense initially. Like the lights, so intense, it was like a flashlight shining in my face. Like it was like almost, you wanted to look at them, but it was so bright that you almost had to look away from it. It was like way bright. And that was what I noticed initially. And it reminded me of Captain Hook and what's that the guy that can fly around, and
Peter Pan.
It reminded me of Captain Hook and Peter Pan, and it literally reminded me of being in the Captain Hook and the Peter Pan story. That's how I felt.
Okay.
I felt like I was in the Peter Pan world of magical quality.
Sure.
And as I was walking, I was expecting to see a fairy at any moment. That's how magical it felt. Like,
did you see any fairies that weekend?
I saw many. Most of them were of a solid 3D quality, like statue fairies.
Okay.
So there was this like magical, like Peter Pan type feeling that I was having. I was like, holy smokes. Like it felt like I could like stick my finger out and like shoot a beam of light from it. Like,
sure.
There was just like a magic that I was feeling. And then as we continued, I began to really get visuals. And the visuals that I got was like looking through a screen door. And the reason I say that is because it was a mesh. It was a mesh of like almost like diamonds. I want to say squares, but they weren't squares because they were in a diamond shape. They were like that.
Okay.
So I saw this mesh of diamonds that basically overlaid my entire vision. And I saw each and every line of these diamonds, and they were all connected. There was no separate piece. They were all one. And as I saw these connected diamonds and lines, they also connected with the trees, and they also connected with the ground, and they also connected with me, because it was literally overlaying my vision. And wherever I looked, this mesh was. And it really brought a sense of oneness to me. Like it appeared like the tree was connected to the ground, was connected to the people, was connected to me. And there really wasn't any separation between the things. It was a part of a complex system, is what I really began to perceive.
And how long did this experience go on? That you were seeing the interconnectedness.
Probably, so it was maybe 7 or 6 o'clock when, well, Yes, it was probably 7 or 6 o'clock in the evening when I ingested this, and it might have been earlier, but I do remember it was getting dark as it was beginning to have an effect, and this oneness experience, really, it didn't really go away. The visuals, maybe around 12, 1 o'clock-ish, the visuals were less vivid, but the colors were still vivid, but the enmeshment was less vivid. I didn't have that overlay as much, but the auditory that I was hearing and the visual was still super bright and super enhanced at that point.
How was your sense of smell during this time? Was your sense of smell increased too? Like, was your awareness like? Could you smell different things that you never smelled had you not taken the LSD at that time?
I don't believe so. I feel like the LSD didn't have an effect on my smell. And
was there more a sense of connectivity to the smell?
not really.
Okay.
Because like when you were asking about the smell, like I was kind of thinking and kind of jogging my memory some, and like I do not have a significant moment that I even remember smelling anything during the whole experience.
Really?
And therefore, because there was no significant smells, I really feel like it didn't have an effect at all on my sense of smell. And I feel like it was, my sense of smell stayed the same.
Okay. Now, when you said you saw the interconnectedness, now, like, did you see other? I feel like when people think of people taking acid or tripping, I feel like a lot of people have this misconception of they just all of a sudden see random things just pop up out of nowhere, and like, did that ever happen to where you just seen some random creature or some random being of some kind that we don't normally see without our awareness increased?
Not at all. I did not see anything that wasn't there. And saying that is super fascinating because I feel like this, when you take this, it affects the reticular activating system, which is essentially a filter for your brain. You receive information, and then the reticular activating system filters that information so that you can make a decision based on the filter. Well, with LSD, the reticular activating system is basically shut off. So there's no filter for information received. And I feel like personally that the visuals that you see on LSD are always there. And when we take it, we can now perceive it. But it's still there without us taking the drug. But because of our reticular activating system working the way it does, it filters out those extra enmeshment between the tree, between the grass, between us. It filters that extra information out because on LSD, you could be looking at a flower for an hour. You could just be like enjoying the beauty of a flower. Well, with primitive people, if you're standing there looking at a flower and a tiger comes and he just eats you because you were you saw the beauty in this flower and you saw the interconnectedness of it, but with the reticular activating system, it like it allows you to filter some of that out. So maybe you see the tiger rather than being enmeshed in the beauty of the flower.
Sure.
So I feel like the reticular activating system is super important for everyday life, but the visuals that you see on LSD, I feel like are there always, but then when we take it, we can then perceive it.
So do you feel like after the fact that you had consumed LSD, like what, after you consumed it, how did it make you feel different? Or did it make you feel different?
So, it definitely had an effect on how I felt. But I also feel like it just enhanced the feelings that I already had. So, I was feeling pretty joyful, I was feeling pretty loose, like flowy, and that really got enhanced. And I remember a time period from about 3 o'clock until 6 o'clock when it was really starting to wear off, and I was sleepy now too. So lack of sleep was a factor, because another thing with the LSD is that you're not able to sleep while you're on it, because it keeps your mind awake and active.
Sure.
And I remember a period where it was now beginning to wear off from about 3 to 6, 7 o'clock the next day, where when someone giggled or when someone would make a noise, like I would just burst into laughter to the point where I was laughing so hard that I wanted to stop, and then I would laugh at myself laughing, and then I would continue, and it was an amazing laughter. Like, it felt like a release of emotion, and it felt incredible. But it was. So I felt happy and I felt like laughing, but then it was just enhanced by this LSD, and like it was to the point where I had stomach aches from laughing, like giggles, and just
that's awesome. So it sounds to me like your perception of seeing and feeling things was altered quite a bit.
very.
Like, going into that next week, in your daily life, like, did you see a change of how your outlook on the world was different, or how you looked at your life differently, or those around you? Like, did the acid, do you feel like it did something to your awareness or to your consciousness at that time?
Yes, I definitely feel like it did.
The effects carried on after?
Yes. And like what I really began to notice is that like we're all one. There is no separation between me and you, between me and the tree, between me and the grass. That was the awareness that I began to carry forward after that experience.
Sure.
And it might not have been fully integrated at that point, because I was still processing like what the heck had just happened. But it was this awareness of connectivity of all things is what I really began to feel and see, like literally see in the daily life, in my life, how connected everything is.
Sure.
And that was not on the drug at this point. That was like the week after, and it still continues with me right now to this present moment. This aspect of I'm able to perceive and see how connected each little crystal is with each little blade of grass, is with each tree, is with each human, is with each entity, is with the cosmos. Like, it's this entire system.
So do you feel like you definitely feel like it helped in that aspect, in the connectivity and the awareness, and do you feel like you were able to think clearer after the fact, like in the weeks and months after the fact that you took out LSD? Or make better decisions?
A way I would word it is not even
more intuitively.
Not even make better decisions, not even live better, but live in flow. And what I perceived and what I began to feel is a flow state, a state of not being particular, even having a perception of what the future is going to hold, not even being particular about what the past was, but just kind of being here now and feeling the flow of change and being okay with that.
Sure.
So, with that said, I hope this brought some inspiration, brought some magic into your life. Stay blessed, stay multi-dimensional, continue experiencing, keep the vibration way, way, way up. Peace.
Peace.